New York City Metro chapter. Today, we are celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. We'll deep dive into the impactful contributions of the API community in cybersecurity. Our expert panels will explore and share insights on current cybersecurity challenges and opportunities, with one of the major themes being this purview of the model minority. API is a model minority and how it affects our careers in general. Our featured speakers is Rob de Garcia, Min Kirianis, and Eric Gonzalez. Now, I'm going to give each one of our panels a richer, much more deserved introduction. But first, I have to do what every Asian is taught never to do, which is brag a little bit about myself, introduce myself. Apparently, I'm supposed to have a co-host, but he's attending some incredible DDS attack, so I am left to do this for myself. So please let me get by this quickly. So my name is John Bernardo. I'm an advertising and film producer specializing in tech and finance. I've worked on accounts such as Sprint Telecom and TD Ameritrade. I recently deep dived into cybersecurity, obtaining my CISA Plus certification from CompTIA, certified in cybersecurity certification from ISC. I try my best to use that knowledge to help brands like InHouse and ThreatNG. ThreatNG is featured here today with their InfoSec marketing. In my spare time, I am an inspirational youth basketball coach and an inconsolable Knicks fan. So, like I told one of our panels today, Eric, I'm going to try my best not to turn this into a Knicks conversation, but I make zero promises. So I'm gonna start with Rob. I'm gonna start with Rob. Rob is a chief tech CTO at Briegel Investments, international private equity firm based in New York City. He's responsible for the oversight and advancement of global technology and information security programs. As a strategic business leader with 25 years of experience in technology and financial services, Rob's true passion is in leadership and team development. Seeing his people succeed, he's a believer that investment in people is the most critical enabler for any team. Rob also serves as a mentor, speaker, and active contributor to Cyversity. He currently has a certified information systems security professional holder. Rob is a native New Yorker, born and raised in Queens. In his free time, he enjoys spending family time with his wife and two daughters in northern New Jersey. First of all, Rob, I see no mention of Knicks fandom. How is that possible? But seriously, Rob, I think I'm gonna, if there's a traditional way of getting into cybersecurity, you seem to have followed that path. You worked in the IT department at the United Nations, and then moved on to financial firms, as you mentioned in your bio, Tremble Capital, AQR Capital Management. Then, after 20 years of such roles and responsibilities, you were hired to be a CTO at Briegel Investments. So my question to you is general. It's generally what tell me your origin story, but how and why you got into cybersecurity. But I'm going to ask it in the way that, do you agree that starting in IT tech and then building towards cybersecurity, is that a natural progression, or did you find that sort of transition difficult?
Yeah. I feel like now it's a natural progression, being 40 plus years old. But when I was in my 20s, it definitely wasn't. Let me get back to your Knicks question. I'm a native New Yorker. I love the Mets, but the Knicks were awesome to watch this year. I don't know what it was, but those three Villanova alumni were just incredible to watch. Um, First and foremost, great to meet everyone on the panel, and absolute pleasure to be here today. I grew up in Queens, New York. I was born in Flushing. Spent most of my life in New York City, and when I went to college, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. I teetered between being like a physical therapist. I wanted to be a music journalist. Shortly after college, I actually became a DJ. So, deeply grounded in hip hop music, reggae, dance hall, and was a DJ for a good 5 or 6 years after college. Then I realized I was getting a little bit old and like, hey, those like 3 a.m. nights and then doing it like day after day, night after night. It was just took a toll on the body and the mind. And, you mentioned the United Nations, and that was just a great opportunity for me to learn about, help desk and support, and that was really my first foray in technology. But then again, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Had no technical expertise at all, no technical background. I was not a typical computer science guy, and really had to, climb uphill, so to speak. And there was a huge learning curve. And when I joined Fitch Ratings in 2022 as a bond rating company. That was really my first like hardcore technology job, and it wasn't without its challenges. I was often made fun of. I remember like one call I got from the help desk. The guy sent me out to like look up like a port number in a conference room, and I had no idea what a port was. So I just looked for anything that had a hole in the wall, and then jotted down like a serial number that was like 30 strings long, and I just could hear the laughter on the phone. So you know, secretly cried in the IDF that afternoon, but realized that hey, I really need to up my game, need to get the exposure, pursue certifications and things like this, and really had was blessed with the opportunity to get that exposure through some of my jobs. So super fortunate, and I think one of the pieces of advice and one of the takeaways I would have for our listeners out there is that you don't need a technical background. You don't even need a cyber background. As part of the mentorship that I've been involved with, really meeting folks that are just from like various different industries. Like I mentored someone that was in healthcare, right? And like my whole thing is, if I can do it, you can absolutely do it. And I lead our cyber efforts at Regal, and most of what I do is actually translating a lot of like technical concepts to non-technical people, which is something I really enjoy.
Yeah. Excellent, Rob. Thanks for that start. Also, I'll tell everyone, watching and participating, if you do have questions for myself and the panel, you can leave that in the comments. But we are going to move forward. Next, we're going to talk to Min Karianis, co-founder and CEO of Amina Systems, Inc., which is developing innovative and revolutionary technologies to protect our digital world. Min has 25 plus years working in industries involved with enterprise and converged systems, information technology, operational technology, cybersecurity, physical security, and risk management across the globe. She is recognized as a technology leader and has held roles on both the client, the consultant, and the manufacturing side while applying her experiences to adopt holistic view to technology and security. She co-founded the Global Cyber Consortium and is a member of Security System News Advisory Board and Curious Mind Dive Foundation's Advisory Board, a STEAM program dedicated to ocean services. She also serves as a member of the board of directors for Women in International Security. She previously served as a chair of SIA's Cybersecurity Advisory Board, vice chair of SIA's New Product Showcase, and co-chair of WIAS in New York. Let me just take a breath there, man. as we joked about, just before this conversation, I just have that is incredible bio and history. I'm exhausted by just reading it. So I'm very, very proud to meet you. So that, again, what we talked about minutes before we got on air, so to speak. First of all, it's a wonder how you have any time to be a Knicks fan, but good for you for that. But but seriously, with such a diverse background, and please, I'm going to ask you to give more of that sort of diversity and background growing up. Talk to diversity in this industry. How tough was it? You're clearly hustling to to get people, women, minorities of face industry. Please talk to diversity in the industry, the issues there, and what you have experienced sort of growing up.
Oh my God, thanks, John. I'm sorry to give you such a lengthy bio. I gotta cut that down. I give you a mouthful there. But in all respect to the question, and I really want to thank Cyversity for this, is really bringing light to how declining, I won't say declining, but how minimal our Asian minorities are, especially in technology spaces. I mean, you see a lot more in Silicon Valley, but again, in leadership positions and also in other forms of areas, they're the minority workers. They really aren't the ones that are out there pushing for these conversations that are really needed to be had. And so realistically, ever since I started my career, I didn't see anyone that looked like me. It was all men. I work in a very male-dominated industry, I admit it, and I've developed a very thick skin throughout the years. Working 25 years plus now in the industry. It's very hard to find someone that looks like me, that represents me. And I've always said this in many of the forums that I've been at, is the minute I see someone that represents me, that looks like me come out on stage, I will step down and give them the platform gladly. Until that happens, it's very, very difficult. And I think I had a parent who came up to me and said, "Min, you work way too hard. Why don't you step back?" I have 2 kids. I have 2 girls. I've been through it. I've seen it. I've seen it all. The disparaging messages I get because I'm a woman, the condescending look sometimes that I go into conferences. I mean, I can give a very funny story about what happened when I went to a cybersecurity conference as a peer, in industry, and someone came up to me and says, "What do you do here? Are you a marketer for the event?" And I just stood there dumbfounded, but said, "No, I'm really here to kind of make you grown men cry." So we became friends at that point afterwards. But the reality is, you don't have that representation that's there that helps me feel comfortable in a room. And it's not just me as an Asian woman, but also white women, young women who are technical enough to be there representing, us, holistically. And it's very, very hard. So I think in that regard, one of the things that we need to think about is how do we open doors for young ladies and folks to come in, or even the minority to come in and really represent us, and really put us on the platform as a peer to other industry experts that are out there, not just, "Oh, you're a woman in security. Oh, you're this or you're that." I think it's really more as how do you get accepted and seen as norm, and really take away the stigma and stereotype of, well, let's just check off the box because you fit this box here. You're not an expert in this because we just need to fill a box. So it's one of those challenging questions that I ask myself a lot.
No, there's a great. I saw a great meme a couple weeks ago, but there was this classic picture. Cybersecurity has this diversity event that showcases 5 different kinds of white guys and someone with rainbow socks. It's pretty funny and representative exactly what you're talking about for sure. So we'll talk about that a bit more, but I also want to introduce Eric Gonzalez. Eric Gonzalez, besides being a seasoned entrepreneur for over 25 years, I know for sure Eric's a Knicks fan because I actually had a drink or two with Eric watching the Knicks. More importantly, Eric founded ThreatNG Security, a leading provider of external threat, risk, and exposure assessment solutions. Since its inception in 2022, ThreatNG has gained recognition for its innovative and patented external security assessment platform, attracting new users with each monthly release. Before ThreatNG, Eric's career path reflects a solid commitment to cybersecurity innovation. He played a crucial role in developing network vulnerability assessment and intrusion detection technologies early on. Notably, he worked at Intrusion Detection, a pioneer in the field that later was acquired by Security Dynamics, an early iteration of RSA. That was in 1997. His successful ventures in database security further demonstrate Eric's entrepreneurial spirit. He founded DB Secure, the first company to offer a network-based database vulnerability assessment platform, which was acquired by Internet Security Systems, ISS. That was in 1998. He then established Application Security Inc., developed database assessment activity monitoring platform that garnered over 2,000 customers worldwide before being acquired by Trustwave in 2013. Additionally, Eric has held a position at SafeNet, a company ultimately acquired by Eric. You have been bought and sold by a lot of people. Congratulations. Beyond cybersecurity, Eric's passion for music, here we go. This is where I met Eric. Extends to performance and entrepreneurship. He has performed multiple bands, released albums in the US and Japan, and even charted on college radio. He also found his record label to support his music and his peers. He's an active investor, demonstrating his keen business acumen in areas beyond cybersecurity, spans music rights management, social media marketing, and New York City wine restaurants. He is a native residing in Manhattan and holds a degree from NYU. So once again, Eric and I met well over a decade ago. He played for, how do we describe, like a charismatic, supersized, alternative hip-hop NYU collective called PIC. So if anybody who's watching or on the panel, if you want to have some fun with Eric, ask him what PIC stands for. It's a good time. But more seriously, Eric, I am going to ask you the more serious question and build on what Min was saying. Get into what is the importance? Like, Min ended with, hey, it's not just about checkboxing. There's a reason why minority report. I'm going to ask you to build on that. What is the importance of having diversity, in this InfoSec industry? Can I put you on the spot for that?
Yeah, sure. Gosh, actually, hearing you read my bio, I just realized how old I am now. It's like, thanks, bro.
1997, 1998. I don't know. Maybe that.
Oh, man. Anyways, but diversity is important, especially nowadays. Like, like in the beginning, actually, when I first started, security was just really putting up firewalls and like throwing on like antivirus like on endpoint computers, and then kind of evolved into like we got websites and defacements and distributed denial of service attacks and all that stuff, actually, which actually catapulted the security industry, if anybody recall, back in 1999. That was like 2012. But diversity is important just because the threat landscape now is just so vast. It's huge. What are we talking about now? We're talking about like things like supply chain, like risks, threats, right? It's in everything and anything that we do. Like everything that we have, like in our apartment buildings and our office buildings, has an IP number attached to it. Like, well, what does that mean? That means that's like an actual point of attack. It's in our ATMs. What do you have? You actually have an operating system in there. I don't know if anybody remembers SQL Slammer Worm, because like you actually had Microsoft embedded in all these like ATMs, and you had SQL Server databases that were running on full ports, and thus that took out a couple of ATMs I know in the Meadowlands. I mean, that was there one time, and so to my point about diversity, it's because the threat landscape is so vast and diverse, and just as much as the landscape is vast and diverse, we need to be just as vast and diverse. You actually have to have teams of like different cultures, speaking different languages, looking at things from different perspectives, artists, musicians, not just like coders or anything like that. It's like so many times, I mean, Rob mentioned this like about like not necessarily being technical, getting security. I mean, that's definitely the truth, and I've proven that like in definitely all of my past ventures and all the past teams I've worked with. It's like the best ones always have a good collective of like people from like different disciplines, backgrounds. I worked with a guy who had a forestry
Wow.
degree, right? And like, you know what? He's one of the best, most brilliant like security guys I ever worked with. Spanning into like since this almost like a ethnic or like Asian centric panel. I mean, it's definitely not a lot of Asians like in my career and growing up in this industry, and still not a lot. It's definitely in Silicon Valley, as like Min mentioned, and it's like definitely you see them as CEOs and stuff, but like definitely not of like say East. As far as like in middle management and like executive leadership, you definitely don't see them, and you'll see them like a handful of them like coding and stuff, but never really all that vocal. It's like, and it's but to my point, it's it's like just having a good diverse team like a version of like different like background cultures. Like
did you say the 18?
Yeah, I said.
Come
18.
on now. What are you? We were already trying to get against the age thing. You went 1980s on us.
Yeah.
But I agree. But I think all these bad actors, domestic political incentives, nation state, objectives, all these sort of activists, their mindset is so diverse. How are we having the same people trying to create a problem solve? It just doesn't, make a lot of sense.
And all the more reason. So again, going back to that broad threat landscape awareness, it's the attacks are different. Like using like narrative attacks, information, disinformation, and everything like that. Social engineering. Gosh, man, everything's out there online, and like
pig butchering. Well, how do we get into pig butchering? How do we label that? Who labeled that?
So. Yeah, I think it's all that, all of the above, and then that all stems into things like just improved communication, collaboration. Building stronger solutions to actually like to address this like growing threat landscape. And attracting, retaining top talent. Look, it's Min mentioned about like women, like not necessarily because like back in the day we try to hire women, but they would walk in and all they just see is a guy fest.
Oh wow, right.
And and let alone like in prior ventures, it was like a pretty well, it definitely was. And let's just say I was the only person of color there.
Yeah.
And so most females don't necessarily want to work in that environment. So, and let alone like a minority female, Asian female, let alone. So, which also brings in the fact that it more diverse, more different team members of different strokes and kinds and whatnot, also would bring out great things like maybe better ethical considerations, right?
Right.
You can only imagine. So it's it works in all different ways, whether you're on the defensive or you're on the defender side.
Hey, can I go back to Min? Because we were having this great discussion. I wish the live button was on already, but I mentioned I saw another podcast that you were in. You were talking about, what Eric was alluding to a little bit at the end there. Disinformation is propaganda. And I'm going to twist that. Obviously, you were talking about a different topic, but I'm going to twist that to this topic and talk about, the perception, the idea of the model minority, right? Especially Asians as being this sort of model minority. We're very accepting, know our place. I can go on, but I want to put you on the spotlight and talk to that. Like you have faced that as much as, and on top of that, what Eric was talking about being the female in the room. Can you talk to that a little bit more? Talk about the model minority, like how that perception hurts our career advancement and any insights you have on that and how we can possibly overcome that. Yeah.
I'm going to do this.
Try only take, right? Exactly.
Oh my God. Yeah, this can be an essay. All right. So I'll put this in twofold. All right. I grew up in a very Eastern household, not an Easternized household where tradition is filial piety. Women have their place in the house. Obviously, I'm not like that, but I grew up with the idea from my mother saying, you need to get married, to stay home and take care of the husband and, cook, do whatever as a housewife should be. And obviously that did not happen. Still took a long time for them to try and figure out what I was doing. I think to this day that they still don't know what I'm doing, but my father, who's unfortunately very sick now, would tell me how to do my job because he's a man and he knows better. So I'll leave that. So that's one side of the cultural mindset that's there as we're growing up. There's the Western side, right? You have the Western culture, which is always talking about yellow fever, how Asian women should be perceived. They're this very, demure, obviously very pretty, dainty Asian woman. And I'm sure you've all heard this before. And obviously I'm kind of against that, completely opposite of that. But you work into an office space and you see this often. It's like, oh, you're an Asian woman. What do you know? How can you speak up? What do you know about technology? And so, yes, I've worked in a very male-dominated world. I've seen this a lot. But then there's another side to it. The stereotypes of we're model citizens. We're not. Not all of us are. And I there was a point in time I was writing a book with a really good friend who passed away, Steven Singular. He was a New York Times writer, etc. And we were working on a book, and I had made a comment to him because he was doing a little research on my background and everything else. And he said, it's very fascinating to see this other aspect of the Asian culture and working with, a social anthropologist who study Asians, right? You're giving a very different perspective about who Asians are, of what we know about Asians. And the books that he's read are written by privileged Asians who came from very educated backgrounds overseas, who went to colleges during a time when there was poverty and et cetera. And so you see a very different outlook, and that kind of transcended down. I grew up in an environment where I didn't have those kind of opportunities. My parents came but poor, as you can believe, working class citizens. I grew up with gangs, and I come to terms with that. It's very interesting when you talk to folks, because when you start thinking about that, it's like, how did you get out of that? It's hard because you're fighting to get out of that because you don't have the privilege or the mentorship to do that. And coming from within, I was one of those people that kind of built up the fuel to actually fight to get out of that. And it's very, very important for people to think about this, because it doesn't matter who you are, what color you are, what race you are. Everybody has a backstory that makes them who they are. It's how they take it and create their career that's most important. And so coming from that side, I think I've come to terms with it, and talking about this more openly is really to kind of tell people, like, look, it's not that I can do it or not what I can't do. It's because I'm willing to speak out and really give people an opportunity, because otherwise, what is this world going to become? right? You don't give women a chance. You don't give minorities a chance. You don't give people of color a chance. You don't give people, who they believe in a chance. We don't have the diversity that's needed to evolve this world into something better. And so it's really, really critical, if you take it from those lenses, to actually give that opportunity to folks and say, I want to hear your idea. What makes you who you are? Because that's going to help me determine how businesses are run, to make it better, to excel, and also to evolve. And so we have to get rid of the stigma and the stereotype that's out there about who model citizens are and who we are.
I think it's I find myself, I don't know if any you on the panel agree, anybody, watching as well. I do catch myself downplaying myself every once in a while. And I pinch myself every once in a while. Sometimes I let it play out. In other words, I downplay, like I see all these sort of different angles because I grew up very similar, maybe middle class, but certainly I rose up to middle class at best, growing up, in Jersey City, and then, experiencing all these sort of different things. I've been able to toggle through a lot of different worlds. And I don't know, I find myself downplaying that every once in a while because I know I get the feeling that talking to people who've only had a level of, homogenous lifestyle, like they don't really get what we're saying. Like, even if we're talking music, right? I feel myself downplaying stuff like that. Like, there's only a small concentric circle of what I can converse with, a lot of people, especially, higher ups of, whether it's music. That's why I always kind of joke around with Knicks is the easy thing to sort of talk about. But I think people get intimidated by that. So, Rob, let me jump to you a little bit because you were talking to some of that earlier. The balance of assimilation, the balance of understanding that, you have to be relate to people who, doesn't have the same sort of background view. But have you had problems in the past assimilating? What are the struggles in that regard that you've seen, and what kind of advice would you give people, coming up and understanding there's got to be a level of understanding, different sides of backgrounds of people?
Yeah, totally. My background, I'm Filipino American. So my parents came to this country around the 70s. My dad came here. He wasn't married. He lived in an apartment in Jackson Heights, Queens, with 10 other Filipinos in like a studio, and didn't have a job. His ambition was to get my mom over here so that they could get married, start having kids. But there was kind of like a tombstone or a internal time clock on that. There was no guarantees. Eventually, he did get a job, but he got his MBA, did nights, and I think that whole story and just hearing it from him, it's really like it's the typical immigrant story, which is totally different from like my story, right? My story is, the sort of influence that he provided for me, my sister and I, was like, hey, just put food on the table, right? My dad and mom wanted me to be a nurse, just like a super like high in demand job. Tons of Filipinos, obviously. God bless them. And wanted also me to be a policeman so I could get like free parking on the street, this like safe pension, and I didn't want to do any of those. I wanted to be like a doctor. I wanted to be a lawyer, like these super high ambitions, and I think the target for both of us was just way off, right? And this all boils down to this story of identity. I was never taught Tagalog, the Filipino language. I didn't really know what group to associate with. And one of the memories that kind of brought this to life was when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and we were driving in the suburbs, mostly Caucasian neighborhood, my whole family in the car, and these two teenage Caucasian, ladies looked at us, cut us off in the car, and yelled, "Go back to China." And as a 7 or 8 year old, I thought, first of all, I'm not Chinese, but what would I actually say to that person? And is it worth it? Do they even know what a Filipino is? So it's so crazy how I still kind of remember the images and what happened that day, because it stuck with me to this day. And the only real exposure to Filipino American culture and like Filipino American history was in college and being around other Filipinos, right? So what was my connection? It was really learning about music and DJing, and discovering that Filipinos were like awesome DJs. Like some of the best DJs in the world were Filipino, like DJ Qbert, all these crews like the Beat Junkies. And it was so interesting to me that I had to discover this small subculture in the basement of a New York City club in order to connect with my people. So I think, long story short, I think there was some additional things that Min said that were super, super, super important. I think when I think about hiring for women, right, and my team is predominantly men, and I would love to hire a woman. I think I'm just tired of kind of saying, hey, I'm an advocate or a supporter of women. Like, I want to be a doer, and I think that's sort of the disparity that a lot of people face. The challenge: how do you get to be a voice, to just saying, to actually doing? So for like an open role that I have on my team, I've made it clear to recruiters, hey, just bring back, I'm hiring a woman, and that's what I'm going to do.
Talk to build on that, if you can, Eric, like on, I'm going to say mentorship. I don't know if that's the right word, but what Rob was saying at the end. Do you feel that you're in a position, to influence getting more minorities in the marketplace? And either way, what is your, the simple question is, how do you advise, minorities coming into the industry? But like, with this idea of expectations of, really got to know what you're stepping yourself into, and knowing that you have to be, I don't know, doubly good at this or whatever. Like, what is your advice, in that regard?
So, to answer the first part, do I have an ability to actually influence, or have I done it in the past? It's like my path to security, or the cybersecurity world. I mean, I didn't think I was ever going to be. I mean, like Rob, I thought I was going to be a rock star. I mean, my aspirations to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. And things happen, and fortunate enough, I fell into this industry, and I loved it. In a lot of ways, it's totally like rock and roll. It's so dynamic. It's changing. It changes month to month, every quarter. Apart from the industry buzzwords, I mean, new threats, personalities, everything comes about. So in regards to my ability to influence, I mean, it's I guess and this came almost just indirectly, was in founding the second company we had, Application Security. We founded it here in this apartment. Well, not this room, but in the room next. And what do we do? It was the year was 2000, 2001. It was right after the dot-com, and people lost jobs. So we were starting out, and just worked my network, and turns out through family and friends, which, I mean, I'm Filipino as well too, and it just turned out a lot of the first guys that we had, and it was guys were Chinese and Filipino descent. It was didn't really think much of it until started hiring other people, and they're like, wow, am I the only white guy here? And, but then as we grew, and through friends and family, and then working with co-op programs within the city and Stevens as well too, it's just wow, more and more Asians. I had never dreamed that actually would be working in technology, let alone security software company with a lot of Asians. And I guess just drawn from just following by example, a lot of these guys and women eventually, it's of Asian descent as well too, and just through collaboration and like putting out releases and working long nights and everything. It's like they went on to like they're holding like VP positions here, CTOs, CEOs, and they're doing their own startups and selling those off. I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. So, so I feel like I have influence and still try to do that when I can, like with all people, you know, especially with like, apart from like being Asian or like any specific ethnic descent, it's like, especially with people that think they can't do it. It's like, oh, I don't know. It's like security, it's scary, technology, scary. I can't code. And it's like, oh man, those are the ones like I gravitate. It's like, no, it's like just like anything, just with hard work. Now going to the skill sets, gosh, it's like apart from like, okay, I truly believe everybody could like gain technical proficiency in this stuff. Everybody can learn what a port number is.
Some faster than others, I guess.
Yeah, like and actually learn how to spell IP, you know, or SQL. It's but I think the biggest thing is like to marry that together with things like business acumen. It's I think it's there's still a dearth of a lot of security like professionals out there that don't necessarily understand what their business does and like the impact of like you know what an actual like a breach would have. It's or you know or just like you know like a phishing campaign, ransomware. Ransomware is pretty straightforward, but like and just to understand exactly like security's place in all functions, whether it's accounting, finance, marketing. Gosh, man, when you think about marketing, what's about like 90% of it done is digitally and online. But like, you know, it's so many times we encounter like old, like, you know, like forms that were put up for some marketing campaign that, oh, by the way, now are actually susceptible to things like SQL injection or like cross-site scripting. Why? Okay, maybe the marketing person, but like the security person should know about that stuff, should be very well aware of those campaigns and everything like that, and also speak to it as well too. So technical proficiency, business acumen, and gosh, it's communication skills. I can't stress that enough. And this goes to everybody. So the foundation of having business acumen, like technical proficiency, communication skills, written, oral, like and public speaking.
Yeah.
Please. It's like I beg security people, please take a public speaking class or like take something or like learn how to actually be confident and expressing yourself. And just definitely
somebody put in the comment, Eric, karaoke. just getting on the stage and not being, you know, sort of being yourself.
Well, that's a great dovetail over into like the Asian part, right? So,
I didn't comment.
So like, but and to like almost touch on the whole model minority of being quiet and demure and like you only speak when you're spoken to. It's like, gosh, I think definitely for like you know Asian American Pacific Islanders, like, gosh, get those communication skills like down. You know, it's like. Develop the business acumen. Like, I mean, I studied business in college, and well, yeah, it's like definitely a lot of Asians there, but not a lot like spoke up, you know. And so get that down, and like, oh gosh, and if you speak multiple language,s
hey, here we go, man. Go, man.
Double down on that stuff. Oh my God.
Which language do you want me to speak in?
Next portion in Taiwanese.
Yeah,
I will go.
I'll start speaking. I'll start rattling off in Taiwanese.
Which is awesome. I love just to throw people off every once in a while with that sort of thing. But I'm gonna, you know, again, I'm gonna build on Eric. He was talking about communication at the very end. Let's keep going on that with like networking, right? I've not seen a stronger networking profile than you. Talk about, you know, again, you've obviously either found programs or founded, you know, these acronyms, you know, or been important. Like, what is the importance? Like, why is that important to you? Why was networking important to you? What were you trying to achieve in that? Or was it just organic? You know, talk to all that. And again, use any language you wish.
Oh my God.
We'll do it in the
Without
chat.
confusing the rest of the audience members, I won't do that. But if you really want me to, I'm happy to do that. That being said, I think really networking is a key thing. But to build on what Eric said, soft skills is such a key thing in relationship development. It's really, really keen. The other thing that I think what Eric touched upon that is really important is the ability to present and be confident in your own skin as you're presenting to an audience, right? Whether it's a small audience or a large audience, it's really, really needed. Cybersecurity is one of those industries, and to Eric and Rob, I think you appreciate this because you came from the same time I did, based on what I'm hearing from you. It's like the IT boom. Back in the 1990s when, it's the next big thing because everybody's going into IT, it's going to be, and so all these startups are coming up and then suddenly you have the crash. Cybersecurity is not much different. I mean, we've been talking about network security for the past 30 years, and now it evolved into cybersecurity because we were talking about how we need to secure these networks for a very, very long time, and no one listened to us. And now as we're into these geopolitical times that we're in right now, cybersecurity is really what it is. 10 years ago, I talked about it as an invisible threat. That's really what warfare is going to be. How do we break into systems and take down entire cities by taking out critical infrastructure? So, when folks come to me about cybersecurity and looking at it from the perspective of, how do I get in? My question always comes out, what do you want to do in cybersecurity? It's so broad, it's so vast, it's similar to IT. So that's something to really, really think about. And then networking, right? We talk about networking. You got to talk to people. You don't talk to people, you don't know what's out there. You can't just assume that it's a field that you can get in, right? Without understanding what the field is. You're going to end up hating it. And I always ask people this question is, what do you want to do? Not what can you do? Because I see a lot of people who are seasoned as well, who have done a lot of great things, who work in a job, but they're miserable. They're great at it, but they're miserable. And so this is stuff that I always tell people to think about as they move forward and taking a look at what do you want to do? And so these organizations that I co-founded, one was because there's a gap in industry and it's needed. Two, it's also to provide diversity and also give opportunities to folks that don't have access to it by giving them the ability to participate in it, right? And provide them with a platform necessary that they can utilize to gain confidence, to talk to people, to network with people, to find mentors, to do a professional development. I think is really, really key and really, really critical for folks to actually take a look at those organizations and what's available to go in. And if you don't know how to get it, talk to someone. It doesn't hurt to ask. And I think this is the fear that, quote unquote, I'm going to use this now in quotes, Asian minorities have. That I can't ask these questions. It's a shame. It's an embarrassment. And you see this as a cultural mindset. And it's not just Asians. You have it in Middle Eastern culture. You have it in India. It's wide and gamut. And as you talk to folks, there's a lot more similarities than there is really out there than you realize with these conversations. And so I always find it fascinating that people are like, well, how do you network? You said it before, I hustled. Yeah, I did hustle. But I also took it upon myself to go out and hustle because no one else is going to do it for me. I know that for a fact, right? We've got to do it and hustle. So there you have it.
And thank God it was the English version. Appreciate that.
Well,
no. What I love that last bit of networking, or really just making sure you're asking the questions, not be ashamed to not know, right? I think that's a big part of getting over this whatever minority mindset or being afraid of not knowing the answer. Because if we're not, I think that's part of it. If you're not seeing people who look like you are afraid to ask because you don't want to be thought down on it any more than you probably are afraid of yourself. But if you don't have the psychological safety to ask, what is this port number 80? What does this connect to? You're not going to get or be as effective sort as you need to. So we have a couple of more questions. Again, if anyone has anything, you could please put it in the comments. But I think let's build on the more of the idea of mentorship. Let's keep building on that. Like, what do you think Cyversity specifically can do? What do you think other programs like been about a ton of programs? What more can they do? For the minority audiences out there, and anyone could do it.
I'll take a quick quick
Please.
stab at this. I'm sure the other panelists have something to say. I just took some notes here on what Min and Eric were saying about communications, and I really want to I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I think if there's one thing that an aspiring cybersecurity or technologist that's on this attending this this panel needs to kind of take away is one thing that they can do. It's communications and really building that skill. Eric talked about public speaking. Once you master that, the principles of public speaking and effective communications will take you a long way. I actually was a poor communicator. I'm not the best now, but being able to speak to the board on risk in non-technical terms effectively without essentially drowning them out and having them look at their phones, and that is such an art. But even if you're in an elevator with an executive and a CEO, and the CEO asks you, hey, how's your day going, and what's new in your land, you're not going to go talk about the New York Knicks and
Hurtful.
go through the whole story.
Where did that come from? Oh my gosh. They're still in the hearts and minds.
I had to chop at you. You're not going to go through the whole story about how Julius Randle was injured and how Jalen Brunson was playing with a broken arm and stuff like that. I think the point is these are all skills that can really just have an immediate impact and really move the needle fairly quickly for you, and also in the long term in your career. I think that's one. And just a super self investment that you can do right away.
No, for sure. I think a lot of the spin on this, especially talking Asian American, is this is hard. Embrace it. Yes, that's what we're good at. The level of hard stuff, doubling down and learning 2 times more than you probably need to. Not just learning the boldface type words, but everything that goes into it, not just the the white keys, the black keys, all that stuff. That's something we can embrace, so that you are malleable. I think a lot of things when it comes to public speaking, performing, or anything like that, all of that is about being ridiculously prepared for even the smallest bits, right? And again, back to sports or back to music or whatever the case may be, you have to be so prepared, not just on a topic, right? When Min was talking about networking, learning all the different facets of cybersecurity, even though you're only going to be a SOC analyst or whatever the case may be, you need to be able to, present or have all those sort of different angles, it's important. And that's what I think, is a specialty of Asians. So that's great. So we are kind of down on the last question, unless you guys have something you want to comment as well. We do have one more class of questions over these panels. Is there anything else you guys want to add that I did not ask? Don't say anything about the Celtics, but anything like that.
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this conversation about AAPI and I'm going to take race out of this whole conversation is, how do we normalize workforce? And I think that's a key factor here, because I've participated in many women events. I've participated as a speaker in many of these events as well. And one of the things that keep coming up is, why are we categorizing ourselves? Why are we not normalizing these conversations? Because at the end of the day, we all bleed, right? And we're all smart, we're all intellectuals, we all thought leaders. How do we normalize these conversations so that the stigma's not there, the stereotype's not there? And I think that's really the question I want to throw out to even you, John.
Yeah.
How do you view that? How do we break down those barriers and peel the onion back a little bit, so that way we're all seen as peers?
Yeah, I don't want to. I'll tell you my approach. I'm not sure if I'm giving advice, but I'll just answer your question directly. I don't mind, and I'll say positively, there's no room I'm not comfortable in. There's no brainstorming session that I don't feel like I can add something to it. and I'll build off exactly what I just said. The reason why I feel that way, because I'm going to go out of my way to outwork everyone in the room, right? I don't know if I can outwork this room and language and all that stuff, but I know that there's going to be an aspect of people in this room, no matter what they're talking about, there's going to be one thing I know, more than them. I used to always think of it simply when I was growing up, just high school. It's like, whether it's either book smarts or sports, I'm going to be in a room where if it's really smart people, I know sports, they're not going to. If I know people, a bunch of sports people, I'm going to know, Dostoevsky more than they're going to know it. But like I just built on that sort of thing, always growing up. That's no matter what room I'm in, there's going to be something I know that these people don't know. And maybe a minority related, maybe not be, but like that gave me a level of confidence that normalize. I don't know if that's the right word I used to finish off my thoughts here, but it's like we can just have these you can feel comfortable having these conversations if you know one thing that these people don't know, whether you even express that or not. Like, have that confidence, because I think with that confidence comes that communication skills, that drive, and everything that you were talking about with the soft skills. I think that comes out. Like, I think that's how it becomes normal. Like, believe, like the more classic sayings, like just believe in yourself, all that stuff. But like, no, that's what Asians do. Like, go at yourself to learn 2 times more than everyone else in the room, and that's how you'll be able to have form relaxed conversations and actually be effective in a room. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my approach to it.
I think you got to force it one way or the other. Like, it's early on, like in one of my old companies, like we had each developer almost like we didn't get a lot of tech support calls back in the day, but we would assign a developer to, like, you're the one answering the phone and you're the one fielding all the tech support calls, and everybody be terrified. Thing is, after doing that, after a couple months, gosh, man, it's like they became better for it all. They understood like actual like users and like their questions and all. It made the application they were building better and everything. Going through like it's like what Rob was saying, like telling recruiters, look, I'm hiring. Well, you almost got to force it in a lot of ways, and then things, good things will happen. Yeah, you got to force the good things. Good things they happen, but it's that's just in my case. I mean, it's one of my brother works in this industry as well too, and things like forming like actual like groups that are maybe ethnocentric to begin with. Like he had one, and I was surprised. Really, God, crazy! Big public security company actually has like an Asian club within it, which I thought was amazing. It's I think you need stuff like that, and you need individuals like who actually have the gumption to actually like force it, and we just need more of those people. We can't just. So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. I think those employee resource groups at work, kind of aligning and hearing what our other peers are going through and some of their challenges in those other minority groups are super critical. And also, just being, part of the AAPI community, I think there's a lot of storytelling going on. Just being on this call for 45 minutes with all of you, I've never met you, and I feel super inspired already, right? And if we think about the broader audience at a macro level, they're going to take these stories back and they're going to share stories with their peers, and it's just this cycle never ends, right? It's so powerful, right? So never really underestimate the power of the story. I think, just being, Filipino American, the whole identity thing has really forced me to be empathetic with other folks who have been challenged in their own lives. And I'm sure, hopefully you all feel the same way. And I think there's something to be said about that. And if you lead with empathy, it really opens doors for collaboration, some really good listening instead of thinking about what to say to add value to the story. really embracing people's personal stories and views and perspectives.
Yeah, stories, definitely, man. Gosh, it's like I remember early on seeing my dad's shelf, like this thing saying Wang. like and pulling out, I'm like asking, what is this? Like, oh, that's a word processor we have at work. And I was like, what's a word processor? Why does this like Chinese name doing on it? And then I remember my dad telling me, it's like, he's the guy who created it. I'm like, wow, that's cool.
No, I love that last piece, Rob, because like Hayden had a question about DEI programs, how that's, you know, those programs sort of been pushed under the HR, rug. What kind of metrics can we use to show effectiveness? I'm going to twist that a little bit, Hayden, and talk and double down what Rob's saying. I think there's a level of storytelling, because I think a lot of marketing in this industry, fear mongering, all that kind of stuff, very basic. But I think this level of storytelling, whether it's Asian American backgrounds, of diversity, I think this level of storytelling of our history now, that there's enough people that have been in the business for 20, 25 years. There's enough understanding of, the kind of interactions we've been in, the kind of things that people should relate to, anybody should be able to relate to. And then there's different things that is unique to us. Getting more of these stories out there, doing more of these panels, doing more of these sort of podcasts. I think that's unbelievably important. I love the way that sort of, because that's a lot of the marketing stuff that I like to push out to outside of, we'll tell people about ransomware, we'll tell people about phishing, something about pig butchering, which is crazy. But I think we just tell stories of how, these things were addressed, how we network to get an idea, to get people together, to have the right diverse thinking, and then the different brainstorm that got to the solution. Like that stuff, I love that part of marketing. I love to push that a bit more.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. It's gosh, another one. Just speaking of Wang, Charles Wang. Like, gosh, one of the co-founders.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I haven't heard that name in years.
Yeah.
That name is old school IT. Holy moly.
Yeah, I guess I'm definitely showing.
Yeah.
So am I by saying that, just so you know.
All right, so guys, unfortunately, I have to wrap this. This is fantastic. Eric said he was going to pay for drinks next after the Memorial Day weekend. So
it's my way.
Thank you so much to Min and Rob and Eric, of course. Thank you for everyone attending this cybersecurity panel discussion, highlighting, of course, the AAPI, contributions and Heritage Month. I can't thank you guys enough. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.